century later, a corrupt U.S. Congress committed the biggest theft in world history. They passed Paul Warburg's Federal Reserve Act in 1913, handing over America's gold and silver reserves and total control of America's economy to the Rothschild banksters. Most Americans still believe that the Fed or Federal Reserve is the government. It is not. The Fed is a privately owned banking system whose majority Class A shareholders are the Rothschilds, Warburgs, Kuhn and Loeb, J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, Israel Seif, and the Lehman Brothers. This private banking cartel is the Fed and is never audited and never pays taxes. They print and design America's money, which displays their symbols of an Egyptian pyramid, a Masonic all-seeing eye, and the words "In God We Trust." Who exactly is the God they trust? They also collect American taxpayers' money through the IRS. Then they loan it back again with interest to pay for roads, bridges, and other public works. Most U.S. citizens believe that the United States is a country and that the president is the most powerful man on earth. The United States is not a country. It is a corporation, and the president is president of the corporation of the United States. He and his elected officials work for the corporation, not for the American people. Since the United States is a corporation, who owns the corporation of the United States? Like Canada and Australia, whose leaders are prime ministers of the Queen, and whose land is called Crown Land, the United States is just another crown.
A very particular way for his Renaissance museum.
He was surrounded by Rothschilds, all of whom, as soon as they made some money, started to collect rather aggressively. I believe in genes, don't you? The Rothschild genes clearly have a sort of mania for collecting. It was partly his father's collection, which he inherited.
I think when Anselm Rothschild saw the Holy Thorn reliquary, he knew that this was not just one of the great moments of medieval metalwork. It was also one of the most precious things he was ever likely to be able to acquire, and extraordinarily rare. The thorn said to be from the crown of thorns put on Christ's head at the crucifixion is surrounded by the most valuable materials: rock crystal, jewels, gold, enamel, so that you have the most spiritually precious object surrounded by the most materially valuable things. And I think that combination of very high quality, very rich materials, and ultimate rarity, well, that's irresistible to any collector.
For Ferdinand, collecting was really very genuinely part of his DNA. We know that from a very early age he was fascinated by collections and collecting. And I have this vision of him following his father Anselm around, sort of learning at his father's knee almost. In his reminiscences, he records his first exposure to his father's collection. My father's curiosities were packed and stored away in a strong room, where they remained until the cold
I was back again from the country. It was my privilege on these occasions to place some of the smaller articles in their own leather cases. Merely to touch them sent a thrill of delight through my small frame.
Spectacular objects in the Woodson bequest, and it's also one of my favourites. It's a boxwood tabernacle, and it's incredibly sculptural and architectural, as you can see in its form. It's like a miniature building, and all the pieces come apart so that you can play with them. So it's got a very strong, playful quality. Playing with those pieces, each time you reveal new scenes from the Christian story. You take off the pelican and her piety finial, and these sections open out like orange segments, and on the inside each is carved with yet another scene. And in the middle is the Virgin Mary, who rises up when you turn this little ratchet. So it's really an interactive toy for taking you closer to the Christian story. Perhaps the most intricate piece of all is this, which is a prayer nut, or Bettnuss in German. The outside is carved with these extraordinary pieces of Gothic tracery, and you can imagine yourself walking around this architectural form of the prayer nut. It's a bit like some astonishing Gothic cathedral. And when you open it up, There are yet 2 more doors which are carved with scenes from the life of Christ. And when you open those, the top half is carved with the scene of the crucifixion in incredible detail. It's like a miniature theatre. I always find it an incredibly moving thing to handle. It's a very personal, intimate kind of object. And then the craftsmanship is so astonishing that every time you look at it, you notice something different, and it really comes to life in your hands. You can imagine the person who first owned this object playing with it